Hello, my name is Zach Bishop. This is my Flowcase presentation. I am a cybersecurity engineer at Kyocera AVX. I want to talk about extending Okta with workflows in Splunk today. As I'm going through this topic, I want you to keep in mind that we're going to be exploring three key points. The first of which is reasons to extend Okta with workflows in Splunk, implementation, as far as implementing workflows that work for us with Splunk, and then of course success story, our success story here at AVX, at Kyocera AVX, and how we save time, energy, and money using Okta Workflows. Before I get into it, I do want to briefly mention that we use Splunk as our SIM of choice. When I say SIM, I mean a system that aggregates and collects data and then outputs events and incidents. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's talk about some reasons to extend Okta. So, we start here with some global manufacturing and R&D locations for Kyocera AVX. We have a number of challenges as a result of this. You can see that there's a lot of locations. We as InfoSec team are charged with securing and defending all of these different sites and locations. Some of our challenges include a complex and diverse environment, all the way down to user education on MFA. Let me go ahead and touch on in a little bit more detail, user education on MFA, as this is a big topic for us. When we first started with Okta at Kyocera AVX, we did not have a culture of MFA, so it was not a well-known process to many users, and we had to engage on many times an individual basis with users on this topic, and that was very time-consuming and used a lot of energy for us. And we began thinking of different ways that we could onboard users more efficiently. And workflows is our solution for this. So we use workflows as part of our MFA onboarding into the process itself. So when a user is enrolled in MFA, we send an email to that user telling them exactly what they need to do, what's going to happen, with documents written by us, our team, in a language that is more receptive for our users. And so that's just one example of a workflow that we use. With that being said, while we're talking about use cases, on the next slide here, let's talk about some more use cases. So we've got a number of use cases here in front of you. You can read faster than I can speak to these. At the bottom, we've also got a graph that shows some of our workflow executions. On the x-axis we have time, on the y-axis we have executions. But let me just touch on a little bit more detail again, enabling MFA on suspicious activity plus notifying the user. So what happens is a user will report suspicious activity on their account in a self-report feature that Okta provides. And upon doing that, our workflow kicks off, and our workflow sends an email to that user telling them that, hey, thank you for being vigilant. Thank you for paying attention and reporting this suspicious activity. We're going to take a look at this. And in addition, we send them a second email saying, also, as a measure to help defend you and defend the company, we're going to enable multi-factor authentication on your account. Here's how you do that. Here's what that means. And all that is automated upon the user reporting suspicious activity. So this is just one example of a use case, but there's a number of different use cases, from enabling MFA all the way down to inform admins when a user is deactivated. But with that being said, let's take a look at how visualizing and analyzing this data might work. So here in front of you, we're looking at Splunk Dashboard. This is what you would look at if you extended your workflows with Splunk. And this is something that we use on a daily basis. We use it to audit our workflows and to analyze what's happening as a result of our workflow executions. So working through these panels very quickly, in the upper left, these are our workflow calls. So our workflow calls are going to essentially tell us which workflows ran, when they ran, what user they were run on, and of course which flow itself was run. This helps us to track errors and also gives us the ability to search for users. So we could search for a user or an event, and then all of those flows related to that would populate in this table here. Moving on to the next panel, in the upper right, we have workflow results. On the x-axis, you've got our different workflows as columns, and then on the y-axis, you have executions. So again, errors here is not exactly meaning like a critical error in blue. Sorry, that is what the blue represents as errors, but they're not exactly errors. They're more like filters or checks. So in most cases, it's because something was going to be changed, but it had already been changed previously, and so it skipped over that change. In purple, the successful executions are actual changes that happened in the environment. So that signifies a workflow having done something that changed a user or a field or something like that. Moving on from there, in the bottom left quadrant, we have workflow errors. We use this to track workflow errors. When you're in the dashboard itself, you can actually mouse over these, and then you can get more detail as to how many errors there are and what is the nature of the errors. From there, we move on to workflows over time. We saw this on a previous page, actually. This is showing how many workflows are running and when they're running. And with that, let's talk about some workflow capabilities. So very quickly, workflow capabilities run the gamut from JSON objects, which is very powerful, all the way down to leveraging user metadata that's natively contained in Okta without having to import that from somewhere else. I want to touch on JSON objects though in particular. JSON objects, so when we look at the cards on the right, that construct card is when we're actually going to be creating our JSON object. This is creating our custom logging that we're going to be sending off to Splunk. Once we have that completed, in this case, we're composing a message, and then we're going to send an email with that message. The compose card is very powerful as well, allowing you to have dynamic text in there with variables. And then, of course, the send email card sends the email to the user. With that, let's look at our helper flow and how to build this workflow. So, I'll give you a couple seconds here, take a look at this. But this is essentially how to build a reusable workflow to send workflow data to Splunk in this case. But really it could be any SIM. So this is going to be a helper flow. The Splunk helper flow will be called by all your other workflows after this. And so that's very powerful because in all your future workflows, you just call this flow and that sends all your data off without any further really requirements needed from you. What you can do then is you can construct your authentication object, and then you're going to set and construct the rest of your data, and then you're going to post that to HTTP as an HTTP post event to Splunk in this case. All of this is handled within the helper flow. You do not need to do this each time, which is kind of the beauty of building a reusable workflow. Next, we're going to see the Splunk helper flow in action. So here I'm just going to walk you through some key points. This is an example of MFA enabled for user as a response to suspicious activity reported. We first begin with object construction. As I've mentioned a couple of times previously, we construct that object with all of our custom logging details. Then we perform workflow actions, which can run the gambit from creating user, updating user, etc. Then we perform final steps, and we call our Splunk helper flow. In this case, we're creating a custom Splunk message here, log message. We're giving that to our helper flow, and then we're giving that JSON object we created in the first card there to the helper flow. And finally, let's look at the results of these actions. Now that we've finished with our implementation, let's look at our results and our success story here. So final results, we have custom workflow raw events, and we have dashboards. These are the results of what we've done. On the left, you can see a raw log. When we were constructing those objects on those previous slides, this is kind of the result of that. This is what you can expect to see. On the right, this is simply just a snapshot of our Splunk dashboard that we use in production. Just looking for suspicious events and then revealing some of those. And then finally, I want to bring you some insight on some ROI and metrics. Now these figures are sourced from Splunk. These are from a live Splunk dashboard. For a little bit more context on these figures, so we essentially estimate how much time it would take for a human to perform these actions, and then from there we're able to take sort of an average salary for an administrator, and then come to these figures here. These are definitely a conservative estimate, but we're very pleased with these figures. Saving over 5,400 hours is definitely a big win for us. So, in conclusion, we've had a detailed look at our journey. We've detailed the reason we extended, our newfound ability to analyze and visualize workflow data, and some of the concrete benefits and results that we have seen as a result. With that, I want to thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure speaking with you all today, and enjoy the rest of the show.